Narca, Narca. Moore, Moore. And for a long time, it was Moore Craig. So Moore hyphen Craig. I use Moore now, but in all the WFO stuff, it's Moore Craig. Yeah. All righty. Let's see. I'll just power mine off. Okay. I think so. Okay. Well, I first heard about WFO about 1975, I think in the spring, when Jeannie Connery stood up in a meeting in Colorado of Boulder Audubon and told people there was a new journal, Western Birds, and it was looking for submissions from researchers and for artwork. And so I talked to Jeannie afterwards and got Alan Craig's address and sent him some artwork. In fact, I don't know if you would like to see it, but I found the very first one, 1975, a Williamson sapsucker. So that was fun. And that started everything. Yeah, I moved to California about 3 years later and was with Alan then for 41 years while he was editor of Western Birds. So I became very involved in the journal at a pretty early date. Yeah. It's probably on my end, and I can't even use my cell phone here because there's no reception in Portal. I have to use it on Wi Fi. So I don't think that would improve anything. Okay. Okay. I'll stare at the red dots. Well, I think a lot of factors, of course. Was passionate about birds from about the early 60s, and here was a whole community of people who were passionate about birds and who were doing really good field work and writing it up, very high quality little journal. So I felt like I found my family, really. Um, that's originally what happened. Yeah. Well, in general, for many years, I was associate editor of the journal. I have a pretty strong background in English and writing, in addition to the art. And so I was quite involved in helping to edit the journal and in sending it out to different people, different associate editors, helping Alan with the burden because it's a big job to edit that journal. And we had a whole network of other editors in each state and in general. So, for instance, in New Mexico, Dale Zimmerman was our editor, and he would review any of the papers that related to New Mexico birds. There were some people like Lori Benford who would just review anything. They were just incredibly outstanding scientists and writers. So I did that for many years. Alan was editor for 17 years, and I was working with it for a lot of those years. And then I was membership secretary for a while. I organized an annual meeting for WFO in Palm Springs back in the 80s, probably about 85 or 86. And then I was president. I was the first woman president that WFO had and their seventh president overall. So that's mainly it. Mhm. Well, I felt tremendously honored to be chosen. John Luther asked me if I would take on the job and then ran it past the board when I told him I would. Um, I come from a long line of glass ceiling breakers, so it felt like the thing I needed to be doing. Even way back, my great aunt was the first woman in her little town to get a job that didn't involve nursing or teaching children. So this is really in my genes. And there have been other glass ceilings too. When I went to the University of California, um, I was given the Yeager Award in field biology. And Edmund Yeager had set up this award stipulating it had to go to a male student. So I was the first student that the University of California gave this award to who was a woman. So anyway, I think those milestones are important. They inspire other young women. Um, we need equitability, fairness in this world. And any example you can point to like that just encourages others. So, mhm. Well, I've seen some fantastic young women ornithologists and biologists, and they seem to be following their passion just fine without a whole lot of advice from me. Um, I guess I could tell you about my niece, Sage, who first came on an ornithological trip. We went to the Northern Jaguar Preserve in Mexico with a whole group of other scientists that included Peter Warshall and Noel Snyder of Condor fame. And at that time, Sage was 13, just trying to decide whether to go into music or go into biology. Well, today she has her PhD ornithology from the University of Missouri. Uh, she did research in the Galapagos. So I think I would just tell young women to look for situations where they can be in the company of these marvelous field biologists and nurse their passion and then really work towards it because they can do it. Yeah, they can. No, I'm not. Yes. Um, I think art is really important for scientists because it teaches you how to see, it teaches you to observe better. When you start doing actual field sketching, you just see things in a new way and you see things you wouldn't otherwise observe. And many of the finest field ornithologists I've known have been artists and scientists. The two just go hand in hand. And if you're an artist, the science gives grounding to your art. If you're a nature artist, and so it's very important to have both in your purview. It's very important to study both. Um, there have been, of course, many applications for art. I brought a few things here. This was the cover of the Arizona Breeding Bird Atlas. You can use your art for so many things, including for conservation work. So, conservation organizations all over the world have used my art. World Wildlife Fund used it for a long time. And Organization for Tropical Studies down in Costa Rica used a poster I drew for them as a fundraiser for their first or very early Christmas bird count. So there are all kinds of applications once you start developing your art. The one back here, this poster, Vagrant Tree, was a piece that I did as a fundraiser for Western field ornithologists. And I know they sold quite a few of them. There's still some around, but it's just a great thing to be able to offer the wider community. Um, Oh, for a combination of reasons. If you are a bird enthusiast, then the papers that are published are fascinating um, on a whole range of subjects. They used to always try to have identification papers as well as the science of different species, the documentation of range expansions, all that kind of thing. So you'd want to join just because you're then part of a community of people who share your interest, and you help each other, you reinforce each other. There's a spark that gets nursed in that sharing. So yeah, I'd really encourage people to join WFO. And it seems like a more intimate group than some of the really big national groups too. You really can get to know most of the people involved in it. And then the journal comes every few months, and it's always a delight to receive. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Unique. Oh, well, it starts out being focused in a particular place, okay? It's primarily the Western US, the borders, the waters that border the Western US. And every once in a while, you go further afield and deal with topics in other places. But it's important, I think, for each of us to be focused in our place. And for those of us who love the West, um, you learn more about it, you experience more, you have this network of people, and it's focused in the place you love. So I think Western birds and Western field ornithologists are unique simply because of that focus. You know a place really in depth, you know it's avifauna in depth, and all of that helps us in this crazy world. Well, I think one thing I'd really enjoy telling you about is a person, and that's someone who's no longer with us, Lawrence Binford, known as Laurie Binford. He was one of the early people involved in WFO and in the journal. I think he joined the editorial board something like the third year. He was curator of birds at California Academy of Science, and he was one of the finest field ornithologists I've ever met. Just remarkable person. I have this here too. He wrote this ornithological monograph, Distributional Study of the Birds of the Mexican State of Oaxaca. And that was the dissertation that he did for his degree at LSU before he went to California. So he brought a great deal of depth as a researcher, as a birder, fantastic birder, and simply as a personality who could pull people together for all of his modesty. Laurie mentored people. He always had some young person who was learning from him that he was very excited to take out in the field, um, and teach and show the world to. The last fellow who had that role wound up, Jake, wound up working after he had graduated from college. He worked at Max Planck Institute in Germany the last time I talked to him. So one time Laurie was visiting us. He was on his way from California to Louisiana. He stopped here in Portal, and we spent a few days birding, and he moved on. An hour or two later, we get a phone call from him saying, "There's a young girl in Hachita you have to mentor. You have to meet her." And he had gone driving along the border road to El Paso and had stopped for gasoline, didn't see anyone working, pumped his own gas, went to pay, couldn't find anyone working. And he walked around the back of the shop, and here's this 13-year-old girl birding. And he went inside with her to pay, and here she has her field guide on a table and this little spiral bound notebook, and she's recording all the birds that she's finding. And Lori was so excited, and we did get to know her. We mentored her for a while. She joined us on field trips, a Christmas bird count, when John Donne came to visit and he and I were driving that direction, we stopped and gave her the field guide that John had been involved with, the National Geo Field Guide, and John signed it for her, you know. So mentoring was one of Lori's major focus points. But he also was a very fine ornithologist. You may have heard the skylark story. This was in the late 70s. There was a reported Smith's longspur at Point Reyes. And Alan and I were both working that week and hadn't been able to go. So the weekend came, we called Rich Stalkup to find out if the bird is still there. And Rich said, yes, it's here, but you'll never guess what happened today because Lori Binford came to see it. And here's a big, imagine the semicircle of scopes all pointing at this little bird in the grass. And Lori was very quiet. And then when he spoke, he said, people, I have something to say, and I'm only going to say it once. That bird is a skylark. And so everybody had to come see the skylark again because they'd all written it down as a Smith's longspur. And Alan and I were very glad that Lori had seen it before we went and looked for it. But anyway, it's the personalities that make WFO, and there's so many stories like this. But Lori is someone who died a few years back. He's no longer with us, but he really deserves to be remembered. He was so fine. So I guess that's my story. Mm. Okay. From the very beginning, um, the very highest standards have been followed, but also a tone that was set at the beginning was that, and Alan Craig had a lot to do with this. They wanted the journal to be readable for everyone. They wanted people who weren't ornithologists to be able to pick it up and appreciate it and be inspired by it. And it involved some very subtle, even grammatical changes, you know. So at that time, most journals were written in third person passive. So, for instance, the very first line in, I was just looking at it in the, the first journal, first published one, starts with a paper that Jean Tashurin did, a note toward the back here that says, June 4th, 1968, I misnetted a Kentucky warbler. Okay. All of the journals at that time would not have structured the sentence that way. It wouldn't have been so straightforward. They would have said, a Kentucky warbler was misnetted in my yard. So from the start, the journal used language that was straightforward, accessible, wanted it to just be powerfully written. And the people in the journal were also always willing to work with young researchers who often hadn't published before and just kind of walk them through the process and help them put together a really high quality piece of work. So we had people on the editorial board. Some people were superb at wordcraft, some were superb scientists, I mean, who would just look at an issue and be able to tell whether that paper had addressed the right questions, whether there was further research needed, where there needed to be a little more depth. So we had people who were fabulous scientists in that way. And then we had some people like Lori Binford and Dale Zimmerman who really did both, who could combine the word craft and the serious scientific questions. So the journal got started on that footing and has kept that standard ever since. Phil Unit has done a fantastic job as the second editor. And I'm sure people have told you there have only been two editors in the entire 30 plus years that the journal has existed. Maybe it's been longer than that. The first one came out in 1970. So, yeah, Phil Unit and Alan Craig have just done a tremendous job as editors, but they've always been supported by the editorial staff, the people willing to review the papers from their areas. And we've had such talent working in that field. Does that answer your question, or is there some other direction that I should go? Okay. Well, I tell you, ever since you asked me to do this, the memories have just been tumbling through. It's been such a remarkable 50 plus years. Um, and I'm really happy that you are taking on this history project. I know it's dear to John Dunn's heart. Um, I think it's valuable because so often we become rootless, in this culture. We lose our sense of the past and our sense of the values that have developed over time. And all of this history type project helps a great deal to help people understand, to see the importance of even these smaller institutions. It don't have to be on a national scale to be really important. And of course, WFO has members from all over the world, but it's still a focused organization. Anyway, I could I could talk for hours about the WFO stories, but I think those are probably enough. Yeah. What are you going to do? Okay, I was wondering what you're doing with the film. Hmm. Well, that'd be fun. Yeah, it really would. Sounds good. I will look forward to seeing what develops. Good. Okay.